Hello everyone, good evening. Welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. So today we have a few very important articles from the Hindu. So let's try to discuss all those important articles. Okay, so they will be very important for your examination point of view. And before discussing all those important articles, let's try to solve yesterday given one prelims practice question. So please participate in this practice questions also. So try to answer these questions in the comment section because they will be helpful for you in the examination, right? Now the question is, exercise Shakti recently seen in news was held between which of the following countries? Now in fact, India very often conduct these bilateral exercises with other countries. So with US, France, Japan, Singapore, Sri Lanka, so different other countries. So we used to conduct these military exercises. Now military exercises essentially test the interoperability, the defense preparedness for any eventual situation. So in order to test all those things and further step up the bilateral relationship and even the relationship in the arena of defense and security fields. Now what happens, we very often procure weapons from other countries, so therefore it is very important to get training in using those weapons, and at the same time sharing these the military tactics of one country's forces with the other country's forces usually happens with these military exercises. Now exercise Shakti was recently seen in news. So it was held between which of the following countries? The correct answer for this question is option A, India and France. Now India and France conduct this exercise Shakti. Now we'll talk about very briefly about this exercise Shakti. It takes place between India and France. So especially this exercise is takes place between Indian Army and the French Army, and apart from that it is a biennial exercise. Now biennial exercise in the sense that this exercise usually takes place once in 2 years. Biennial means once in 2 years. So this mission exercise Shakti is also a biennial exercise, and it was first started in the year 2011 and is conducted alternatively in India and France. So it is not just conducted in India, but it is alternatively conducted in India and France. For example, one exercise is conducted in France, and the next exercise will be conducted in India. Now 6th edition of the military exercise under this Shakti was held in France from 15 to 26 November 2021. Now since it is a biennial exercise, it will be held once in 2 years. The 7th edition of the exercise Shakti between Indian Army and the French Army was held or hosted by India at the joint training node in Umroi, Meghalaya from 13 to 26 May 2024, and this is briefly about the exercise Shakti, and it is a military exercise between India and France. Now another important practice question for prelims is, Justice Rohini Commission is very often seen in news, is related to which of the following things? Now please understand this. Option A, restructuring of MSMEs. Option B, subcategorization of OBCs. Option C, Committee on Cybersecurity. And option D, insurance sector reforms. Okay, so please try to answer this question in the comment section, and the correct answer I'll provide you in the next session. Now let's start this discussion, analysis of the newspaper with few important editorials. Right, the first a very important article is with respect to climate change, a passing cloud in Indian politics. Now please understand very carefully that we are going for the 18th Lok Sabha polls, 18th general elections. Now almost all phases of elections are completed. However, even though we are going for the 18th general elections in India, so the political campaigning has not centered around climate change. So in fact, climate change is a very important area to focus on. However, no political party has considered climate change as a priority issue, because climate change is now a reality and we must take a concerted action against climate change. And in fact, climate change is not just limited to India, but it is a global phenomenon. But at the same time, the political will to act against climate change and also undertake certain measures to reduce the levels of greenhouse gases or limit the climate change, or also take up adaptation and mitigation measures to this climate change, is very, very important. But the problem is that the current political parties have not considered climate change as part of their political discourse to appeal voters. Now, why this is happening and what will be the consequences, we will be understanding in this particular editorial in a very brief manner, and why it is very important that we need to keep climate change at the center stage in these political campaigns. Now, the discourse on climate change in Indian politics. Now, the discourse is actually, how we are prioritizing climate change in the political arena, in the political campaignings, and how the political parties are actually mobilizing voters through the climate change stance. Now, the discourse on climate change in Indian politics actually highlights a glaring omission or complete exclusion of this critical issue of climate change. Now, the political parties are actually excluding the issue of climate change from the electoral agendas. Now, if you look at the most of the political parties are talking about free power, they're talking about certain other freebies, but they're not taking care of the climate change, and that is particularly concerning in the age where climate change would pose more risks. So this particular exclusion persists despite the pressing global environmental crisis. Now, so if you look at the a global environment, so it has been facing a lot of challenges. For example, within India, we have been seeing the heat waves, extreme heat wave like conditions, increasing intensity of cyclones both in the Bay of Bengal and at the same time the Arabian Sea, and forest fires, degradation, desertification, deforestation. So we have been facing a global environmental crisis within India, and this environmental crisis actually pointing out towards the urgent need for sustainable development and a concerted action towards the climate change or acting against climate change. Now, however, with respect to this political arena, we have been seeing the political reluctance and strategic avoidance of the area of climate change or the topic of climate change. Okay, so because environment has been posing a significant challenges due to climate change and increasing greenhouse gases, right? So for example, rising sea levels, submergence of the coastal areas, coastal cities, migration of the people out of those coastal areas is very, very important. So therefore, we have been facing extreme environmental challenges in present times. So therefore, keeping climate change as a lower priority issue in this entire electoral rhetoric or political campaigning is something which is concerning. Okay, so the political parties are actually not prioritizing climate change as a subject to be given adequate importance in recent times, especially for India. So this particular exclusion actually reflects a broader trend of sidelining the long-term environmental sustainability for short-term economic goals. Now, we have been talking about the economic growth, employment creation. So economic growth and employment creation is fine, but along with those things, we should also prioritize the environmental sustainability, because environmental sustainability is actually a long-term goal, and long-term goal actually requires a vision from the political parties and even the ruling government also. However, the present political discourse actually prioritizing the short term goals over the long term environmental sustainability. So, that could come up with significant challenges for India in the future. And apart from that, a lot of experts have considered this as a calculated omission or calculated exclusion of the issue of climate change by the political parties, because most of the political parties are actually reluctant to prioritize climate change. So this is because of the potential political cost that is being involved. Now understand that, for example, UPA government prioritized climate change. Now, UPA government prioritized climate change, and UPA government also made climate change as a center of its policy. If it starts taking certain measures with respect to combating or dealing with the climate change, or majority of the importance is given to deal with the climate change, then there is a chance that India, with the lesser technology and lesser financial resources, we may not be able to achieve the required amount of growth. We may not be able to invest in certain other sectors such as social sectors or industries, etc. So therefore, from the political parties, what we have been seeing, there is a calculated omission or calculated exclusion of the issue of climate change by these political parties, because a serious climate action actually requires addressing trade-offs between industrial growth and environmental sustainability. Now we have to curtail the industrial growth because industries are mostly responsible for the emission of greenhouse gases. Okay, so if we prioritize environmental sustainability, to some extent we have to curtail the industrial growth. So because of that reason, the political parties are not taking climate change into account, or they're not considering climate change as an important political issue. And if they start, considering climate change or environmental degradation as an issue, they would start taking certain actions, or they impose certain restrictions on the industries, which could alienate the powerful industrial constituencies. Okay, so they will not be able to influence the powerful industrial constituencies in the country. And apart from that, there are also vague manifesto commitments from different political parties. So the manifestos of major parties actually lack a concrete and actionable climate policies, and that is clearly visible from the manifestos of these political parties. And in fact, I have very often emphasized on Mission Panchamrut that the government wanted to achieve by the year 2030, and it consisting of 5 different goals. And one such goal was becoming net zero by 2070. So this is what India wanted to achieve by the year 2070, right? So apart from that, we also have COP21 Paris Agreement. And this COP21 Paris Agreement wanted to limit global temperatures to 2 degrees Celsius by 200, by 2100 year, if possible below 1.5 degrees Celsius, below 1.5 degrees Celsius, pre-industrial levels. So to achieve this 1.5 degrees Celsius, world must reduce annual CO2 emissions to 48% by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. So that is how we can achieve the 1.5 degrees Celsius target. And again, India's net zero target is 2070. Right, because see, when temperatures are increasing, when temperatures are rising at a faster pace, so that is coming up with the lot of negative implications. For example, melting glaciers that we have discussed yesterday, and melting glaciers results in rising sea surface levels, submergence of the coastal areas, the water entering into the fertile plains and creating the food security challenges, and even increasing the sea surface temperatures. Increasing sea surface temperatures will make the cyclones more intense and destructive. So all these factors are mostly because of the increasing climate change, increasing global temperatures. Now, what is the impact of political inaction on climate policy? So we have to understand the impact of political inaction on climate policy. So firstly, understand why there is a widening of climate vulnerability. Okay, so there is a widening or increasing climate vulnerability, because see, what kind of a climate vulnerability? Now, climate vulnerability for rising sea levels. The sea levels are actually rising because of the melting glaciers firstly, and it is also very often associated with extreme weather events. Now, extreme weather events include heat waves, regular heat waves across the world, and apart from heat waves, increasing the cyclone activities. Okay, so all these factors comes under the extreme weather events along with the rising sea levels. And also in cities we have been observing the higher levels of pollution, especially the air pollution. Now, air pollution is caused by a wide variety of factors. So now, factors including vehicular emissions is one factor, and apart from vehicular emissions, industrial emissions also causes this air pollution, and open landfills in urban areas also creates this air pollution. So all these factors are considered as environmental challenges. Okay, so they are increasing the vulnerability of the existing environment. Now, it actually highlights there is a critical need for robust climate policies. Okay, so climate policies have to be further stepped up to deal with all these challenges, including rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and even air pollution. So even though a major steps required to deal with the climate change, the political discourse in India as of now is not prioritizing climate change as an issue and not taking up this long-term environmental sustainability that is particularly challenging here. And after that, we need to talk about the electoral disconnect. Okay, so because if you look at any major political party's manifesto, so in manifesto, the political party actually mentions what it wanted to focus and what it wanted to do for the people in the next 5 years if voted to power. So that is manifesto, right? Now, if you look at any major political party's manifesto, there is a clear absence of detailed climate action plans. Okay, so there is no such detailed climate action plan. So how they are going to act on the climate change, how they are going to deal with the climate change. And in fact, this a very neglect of climate change by the political parties actually created a kind of discontent, or it has sent a disheartening message to the educated middle class voters, because educated middle class voters are very well aware about the negative consequences of the climate change and increasing global warming. So therefore, political parties not prioritizing the issue of climate change has sent a disheartening message for these educated middle class Indian voters, because they are increasingly demanding actionable sustainability plans from the government or from every political party. Okay, so only through these actionable sustainability plans from the government we will be able to address the existing environmental challenges. And in this context, this educated middle class is very, very important for shaping public opinion and at the same time policy through their voting power. So they have the power to actually shape the political discourse in India. So after that, we need to talk about the policy documents and implementation as well. Okay, so the National Action Plan on Climate Change that the government has launched. So this National Action Plan on Climate Change actually have 8 submissions. Okay, so it actually includes 8 submissions. For example, National Mission on Himalayan Sustainability, National Green India Mission, right? So National Mission on Sustainable Agriculture. So in a similar way, there are 8 submissions that the government has launched as part of the National Action Plan on Climate Change. And recent policy documents like National Electricity Plan 2023. So it focuses on conservation and electricity efficiency. So it is also very, very important to deal with the climate change. See, now majority share of our electricity is generated from the fossil fuels. Now when we conserve electricity or use it a more efficient manner, then we would reduce the usage of these fossil fuels for generating electricity. And apart from that, we have also launched this National Green and Hydrogen Mission. So this National Green Hydrogen Mission is actually launched by the government. In fact, this green hydrogen is produced through a process called electrolysis. So through electrolysis process, this green hydrogen is being produced, and this green hydrogen is completely green in nature. So it is completely green in nature, and it does not come up with any emissions. So therefore, the government has also been emphasizing on this green hydrogen. And all these programs that the government has already launched. So however, these policies often follow a top-down approach. Okay, so top-down approach in the sense that these policies are flowing from the top of the government to the grassroots level, rather than there is absence of the policies which focuses on dealing with the climate change from the grassroots levels. Okay, so actually we require bottom-up approach. Okay, so bottom-up approach. But now the governments are bringing policies which have been emphasizing on top-down approach, which are mostly ineffective in addressing the climate change at different levels. Okay, so we have different aims. One is 2070, we wanted to become net zero. So that is part of the Mission Panchamrit. And we wanted to create a renewable energy capacity of up to 450 gigawatt by 2030. And we also aimed at 30% electric vehicle share by 2030. And even we are also very close in achieving nationally determined contribution target of 40% share for non-fossil fuel installed power capacity by 2030. And after that, there are certain challenges and opportunities in the area of climate action. Now, what are those challenges and opportunities for the climate action? So first and foremost, we need to shift our focus towards a recent Supreme Court's judgment in this M.K. Ranjit Singh and others versus Union of India case. Okay, so this was M.K. Ranjit Singh and others versus Union of India case. Now in this particular case, the Supreme Court actually recognized that Article 21 and Article 14, because the Supreme Court in this particular case recognized the right to be free from the adverse climate impacts. Okay, so everyone have a right to be free from the adverse environmental impact, adverse climate impact, and in fact it is part of Article 21 right to life and also Article 14 right to equality. And this is what the Supreme Court has said in this M.K. Ranjit Singh versus Union of India case. So therefore, the ruling actually opens the government climate bodies to legal scrutiny and accountability. Now, the legal bodies and the government are now accountable because of this particular judgment of the Supreme Court. And in fact, Article 21 is a broad fundamental right, and it also encompasses other important fundamental rights. And now Supreme Court has also recognized right to be free from the adverse environmental impacts as part of Article 21. And apart from that, we require a strong political will from the government side. Now, if there is no political will from the government side to act against climate change, then we will not be able to achieve any of the set targets. So therefore, there is a strong political will is required from the government side. So therefore, a bridging gap between the electoral politics and effective climate policy actually requires the political will. So the political parties or the ruling governments started prioritizing the long-term environmental and social gains over the immediate economic benefits. Okay, so it is important that we must balance environment and economic growth. but the political parties must prioritize the long-term environmental and social gains over this immediate economic benefits in this political discourse also. So this shift actually requires, or it demands, a concerted effort from the media, civil society and electorate. So they actually put a pressure on the government to prioritize the environmental sustainability as a priority or an important issue for the government. And in this particular aspect, how electorate can play a very important role in pressurizing or influencing the government or persuading the government to take up the long-term environmental sustainability as an issue. In 2014 general election, so it actually presents a good opportunity for the voters or the electorate that they can demand more proactive and concerted committed action from the government to act against this particular climate change, because informed voters like us must push these policies, particularly the policies on environmental sustainability, long-term environmental sustainability, to ensure sustainable growth and the environmental security in the longer term. So that particularly influencing global fight against climate change. Right, so I hope you have understood about this particular article. And the next article is about Russia has been taking up the new nuclear posturing of the Russia. So the risks of Russia's nuclear posturing that we need to understand. Now understand the context of this particular article. So the context is that the ongoing conflict, recently a few days back that we have discussed that Russia has been planning to make the strategic nuclear weapons or tactical nuclear weapons. Now tactical nuclear weapons are actually very minute in nature, so they can be used in a conventional wars with the limited impact on the adversaries. Right, for example, so when we talk about the nuclear weapons, I can tell you clearly, when we discuss about these nuclear weapons, so please understand these nuclear weapons cannot be used in the conventional warfare. So in fact, they create a lot of destruction. Okay, so conventional wars in the sense, for example, a war takes place between Russia and Ukraine, and that is known as conventional warfare. But one instance where the nuclear weapons were used by US against Japan was the Second World War. And in fact, those nuclear weapons created a lot of destruction in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. Okay, so when we talk about these nuclear weapons, they never used in these small conventional wars, because they create a lot of destruction. And in fact, they have the capacity to wipe out or destroy even 2 or more cities. So because of that reason, these nuclear weapons are very often, they are reluctant to use these nuclear weapons. And in fact, these nuclear weapons are very often used for the purpose of deterrence only. So deterrence in the sense that, for example, country A possessed nuclear weapons and country B also possessed nuclear weapons. Now country B will not attack country A with nuclear weapons because country A also possessed nuclear weapons. And in a similar way, vice versa, country A will not attack country B with nuclear weapons because both of them have already have the nuclear weapons. Okay, so because if they use these nuclear weapons, so that will result in the large scale destruction. So it is actually based on the mutually assured destruction. So destruction of both these countries, and because of that reason, just nuclear weapons are being used as a symbolic purpose for deterrence. But now Russia has been planning to develop these tactical nuclear weapons. Okay, so these tactical nuclear weapons are not like the conventional nuclear weapons. So these tactical nuclear weapons are very small in nature, so they create a very less destruction compared to these conventional nuclear weapons. So therefore these tactical nuclear weapons, since it creates a very less impact, they can be used in these normal or regular wars also. Okay, so that is how Russia is planning to develop these tactical nuclear weapons, because they create a lesser impact, lesser destruction, and clearly Russia can achieve an edge over any other country so which attacks Russia, which does not have the nuclear weapons. Okay, so any small country which does not have nuclear weapons, if it attacks Russia, Russia can use those tactical nuclear weapons and can clearly get an edge. Okay, now this ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine has actually intensified Russia's recent nuclear posturing. Okay, so it has intensified or increased Russia's nuclear posturing because see, in Russia-Ukraine war, there is no clear victory for either side. Whether to Russia or Ukraine, there is no clear victory for the either side. And in fact, including drills which are simulating the use of these tactical nuclear weapons. I've already told you what exactly is these tactical nuclear weapons. And stationing the nuclear arms in Belarus, so that is a very close ally of Russia. And this escalation actually raises significant concerns about the global nuclear stability and principles which are governing the nuclear deterrence. Now, I've already explained the nuclear deterrence, that so these countries actually possess use nuclear weapons for the symbolic purpose. Okay, so that is nuclear deterrence. Okay, so since country A possessed nuclear weapons, country B will not attack A with the nuclear weapons. Okay, so some scholars also propose theory that the nuclear weapons have prevented the another world war, third world war, because of this deterrence. Now, what is the controversy surrounding Russia's nuclear posturing? What exactly is this issue? We'll understand very briefly. And recently, Russia's nuclear maneuvers, so they are framed as a response to the comments by Western leaders. Now, Western countries, most of these Western countries are actively supporting Ukraine in this Russia-Ukraine war. So, in fact, they actually seem like attempts at brinkmanship rather than reactions to the genuine existential threats. And this nuclear posturing from Russia is particularly alarming given the potential for lowered threshold for the nuclear weapons use. Okay, so there is a potential, that Russia can use these nuclear weapons, or lowered threshold for the nuclear weapons use from the Russian side. And this actually signals a shift in the nuclear doctrine from the Russia. Okay, because historically nuclear deterrence relied on the principle of mutually assured destruction. Okay, so understand nuclear deterrence. I am explaining this again. See, both these countries possessed nuclear weapons, and if country A attacks B, country B also retaliate the attack, so that will result in the destruction of both these countries, and that is known as the mutually assured destruction. The nuclear doctrines across the world are actually based on this mutually assured destruction. And in fact, the countries have also agreed that the nuclear weapons are can be used only as a measure of last resort. So in a war, if every means are exhausted, only then these nuclear weapons can be used or to be used. However, Russia's current strategy actually represents a significant departure from these norms. Okay, so a significant departure in the sense that this nuclear deterrence or mutually assured destruction and even using nuclear weapons as a measure of last resort, so these are the conventional principles with respect to the nuclear weapons or nuclear warfare. But Russia's current strategy actually represents a significant departure from these norms, and that could potentially normalize the use of nuclear threats in these conventional conflicts. Okay, so since Russia is not paying enough attention to these nuclear doctrines, so Russia actually normalizing the use of nuclear weapons, tactical nuclear weapons in the conventional warfare or conventional conflicts also. Now, so what will be the impact on the global security? So that is we have to understood, that we need to understand. Okay, so what will be its impact? Russia normalizing the use of nuclear weapons even in the conventional wars, such as Ukraine-Russia wars. Okay, so by lowering the nuclear use threshold, by lowering the nuclear use threshold, in the sense that now in tactical nuclear weapons, they do not create enough destruction. Okay, so rather they can be used in a warfare, a smaller scale. So therefore, what Russia has been doing, Russia has been coming up with an alternative to existing nuclear policy, and it has lowering the nuclear use threshold. And Russia actually risks setting a precedent for other countries to follow. Okay, so that could encourage other nuclear and even non-nuclear states to adopt similar nuclear postures that could create global instability, and at the same time that could also disturbs peace. Okay, so that could increase global nuclear proliferation and even create instability. Nuclear proliferation in the sense that, for example, there are certain nuclear weapon states, and those nuclear weapon states already possess nuclear weapons, and those countries try to increase their nuclear stockpile, comes under the nuclear proliferation. There are countries like China and Pakistan, they are further increasing their existing nuclear stockpile. So that could create instability. Okay, so that also disturbs the peace in the region and beyond the region where these nuclear weapons are located. Now, what will be the global security concerns and policy implications of the tactical nuclear doctrines or nuclear postures of Russia? So in fact, it sets a dangerous precedent for other countries also, because now as of now Iran does not possess nuclear weapons, but it aspires to acquire nuclear weapons. But on the other hand, North Korea already possessed nuclear weapons. So therefore, the lowering of nuclear threshold by Russia can actually set a precedent for both Iran and North Korea to use this same strategy. Okay, so they can flaunt these nuclear capabilities as a deterrent in these conventional conflicts. So in case if there are any conventional conflicts, so these countries can easily threaten other countries to use the tactical nuclear weapons. Okay, so that could create a huge instability across the world. So therefore, this could lead to increase in the nuclear arsenal from these countries across the world, and at the same time it could also undermine the efforts towards nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. Nuclear non-proliferation in the sense that the existing nuclear stockpiles will not be increased, and at the same time whatever nuclear arsenal that we have already possessed will not be used against any country. For example, if you look at India, so we have no first use doctrine. Okay, so this is India's doctrine, nuclear doctrine. So we'll not use these nuclear weapons at first instance. But any country attacks us, any country do the nuclear attack on us, then we'll respond with the massive retaliation. Okay, so we'll use almost all our nuclear stockpile. So that is one such strategy that India follows, that is India's no first use policy. And recently there are demands that India should revise its no first use doctrine, or review its no first use nuclear doctrine. And apart from that, this recent posturing of Russia to use these tactical nuclear weapons will also lead to the erosion of non-proliferation efforts. So there are a wide variety of non-proliferation. For example, non-proliferation treaty and comprehensive test ban treaty. So both CTBT and non-proliferation treaty actually focused on the non-proliferation of the nuclear weapons. And the tactical weapons which are being developed by Russia would set a wrong precedent for other countries across the world to possess these tactical weapons, and they start using these tactical weapons in the conventional warfare also. So that could create instability, that could result in disturbance to the peace. So therefore, the war has highlighted the vulnerabilities of non-nuclear weapon states. And the non-nuclear weapon states understood the consequences of using these tactical nuclear weapons. For example, now understand, Ukraine does not have these tactical nuclear weapons or nuclear weapons, but on the other hand, Russia possessed these nuclear weapons. And if in this conventional warfare, Russia uses tactical weapons against Ukraine, then Ukraine would also feel that we should also possess these nuclear weapons so that we can use them against Russia. So this is not just confined to Russia, Ukraine, but other countries may also feel the same, and that could lead to the erosion of the non-proliferation efforts. So earlier there was a Budapest memorandum. So according to this Budapest memorandum, Ukraine has gave up its nuclear arsenal, because see, Ukraine was earlier part of USSR, right? So when Ukraine was separated from Russia under this Budapest memorandum, Ukraine has gave up its nuclear arsenal to Russia. So in return of security assurances to this Ukraine. Now appears ineffective. This Budapest memorandum would appear ineffective because now Ukraine feel that this Budapest memorandum has actually a disadvantage. It has resulted in a disadvantage for them because it has given up all nuclear arsenal to Russia. So potentially discouraging any such future disarmament agreements also. And after that there will be a clear shift in the nuclear deterrence also. So clear shift in the nuclear deterrence in the sense that the traditional, a clear distinction between the nuclear war and conventional warfare. Now I'm again telling you that the present war between Russia and Ukraine is a conventional warfare, and whenever if any war takes place between two nuclear armed states and any country uses nuclear weapons, so that is known as the nuclear warfare. So therefore the limits or the boundaries between the conventional warfare and the nuclear warfare are actually blurred, and therefore Russia signaling suggests that nuclear weapons might be considered for coercion in lower stake conflicts. Okay, so any country which possessed these nuclear weapons can start coercing the small states that, okay, so if you don't listen to us, we will use these tactical nuclear weapons against you, so you will not win over us. So that actually means coercing the smaller countries and also shift in the nuclear deterrence, and that could potentially alter the global nuclear deterrence landscape. So what will be the challenges and future implications of this particular strategy from Russia? So there is a chance of increased proliferation. More and more countries will look to possess these nuclear weapons. Okay, so there are a number of smaller states in the conflict prone regions. For example, imagine this Middle East. Okay, so those countries would start procuring these nuclear weapons, or they focus on procuring nuclear weapons. Okay, so they may pursue nuclear capabilities to secure asymmetric advantages in conventional warfare and increasing regional and global proliferation anxieties also. And after that, there is also global stability is being undermined. So undermining global stability in the sense that the potential for tactical nuclear weapon use in this conventional conflict actually poses severe risks to the global stability. Okay, so it creates severe risks to the global stability when everyone starts procuring these nuclear weapons and starts using these nuclear weapons in the conventional warfare that could threaten to replace the deterrent effect with escalatory spiral. Now there will be no deterrence effect. For example, again come to this example of A and B countries which both possess nuclear weapons. So since every country start using these tactical nuclear weapons, now using tactical nuclear weapons would further fuel the use of large large threshold nuclear weapons also. And therefore there is a need for revised international policies. We need to revise the international policies. The international community must reassess and strengthen nuclear non-proliferation treaties and mechanisms to address the emerging threats which are being posed by such nuclear posturing and ensure global security and peace also. So for that particular purpose, we must as a global community must put pressure on countries which trying to procure these tactical nuclear weapons, which are trying to use these tactical nuclear weapons in the conventional warfare. So because of the significant implications for such use, the global community must put a pressure collectively to prevent use of nuclear weapons even on the conventional warfare. Okay, so that's it. And the next important article is with respect to the X chromosomes. Now in mammals, especially among human beings, so both male and female actually have these X chromosomes. Okay, so wait. So both male and female actually possess these X chromosomes. Now revival of these X chromosomes actually result in sorry for that. Okay, so revival of these X chromosomes in older women actually increases the autoimmune diseases. Now what is this autoimmune diseases? I'll briefly explain this autoimmune diseases, right? So autoimmune diseases are those diseases where body's own immunity will mistake our own cells as a foreign elements and start attacking our own cells. Okay, so body's immunity system starts attacking body's own cells, and that results in autoimmune diseases. Now understand this particular context of this article. Recent genomic studies, genomic studies actually have actually make a study on the genomic data, right? So the recent genomic studies have shed light on the fundamental biological processes the X chromosome modulates and the genes. Okay, so the recent genomic studies actually done a fundamental biological process study on these fundamental biological processes, X chromosomes, modulates and genes that it encodes. So the gathering evidence or the evidence actually suggests that after this study, the evidence actually suggests that the X chromosomes and the genes which are associated with these chromosomes actually plays a part in having a variety of biological functions as well as controlling the sex specific susceptibility to certain diseases. Now understand, so in every chromosome there are number of genes. Now in this particular study, first the chromosomes are studied, and along with, for example, this is a chromosome. Okay, so this is a chromosome, and within these chromosomes the genetic material, this is how the genetic material is present in these chromosomes. A study was conducted in X chromosome along with the genetic material that it possessed, and the evidence from that particular study has revealed that the X chromosome actually plays a very important part in a variety of biological functions as well as controlling sex specific susceptibility to certain diseases. Now briefly understand about these X chromosomes. The X chromosome is an important part of the mammalian genetics, right? So we human beings are mammals. So apart from we human beings, there are certain carnivores, for example tigers, lions and even elephants. So they are mammalian species. So X chromosome is an important part in these mammalian genetics. So that does a lot more than just determine sex. And in fact, these X chromosomes plays a very important role in determining sex among the human beings. Now, when it comes to humans, females have two X chromosomes. Okay, so females have actually possess two X chromosomes, and men actually have one X chromosome and one Y chromosome. Right, so in males, X chromosome is paired with the Y chromosome. Now recent genetic studies have shown that human X chromosome has around 800 genes. That, see, you can see human X chromosome have around 800 genes within it. Now most of these genes are involved in making proteins. So genes actually play a very important role in making proteins, and proteins are very important for the functioning of the body. And most of these genes in the X chromosome in the human beings play a very important role in making proteins. So this new information about the X chromosome's genetic makeup actually helps us to explain how the genetic makeup in X chromosomes affects many biological processes and how it plays an important part in creating diseases or limiting new diseases. Okay, so therefore this particular studies on X chromosome and the genetic material within these X chromosomes influence on diseases can be categorized into three primary types. Now first type was X-linked genetic diseases. So these X-linked genetic diseases result in directly from the mutations. For example, this is X chromosome, and within X chromosome we have understood that there is 800 genes, and if this genetic structure changes or this genetic structure modifies, then mutations would actually takes place within these genes. Okay, so this X-linked genetic diseases actually takes place because of the genetic mutations that are caused in the genetic structure within the X chromosomes, and that would result in diseases like Duchenne muscular dystrophy and then hemophilia. And the second category of disease is diseases which are being influenced by X chromosome inactivation. So this X chromosome inactivation is actually a process where one of the X chromosomes in females, for example, females have two X chromosomes and males have one X chromosome and Y chromosome. And in this particular diseases, one X chromosome among females is being deactivated or inactivated. However, some genes escape this inactivation, and that can lead to disease if their expression is further altered. So this is the second category of diseases within the X chromosomes influence. Next, third category is diseases that linked to the X chromosome aneuploidy. So conditions like Turner syndrome and Klinefelter syndrome arise from these atypical number of X chromosomes and demonstrating a chromosomal impact on the various other diseases. Right, so these are three categories of diseases. Now we'll briefly understand about this autoimmune disease. I have already told you what exactly is this autoimmune disease. These autoimmune disease happen when the body's immune system attacks. So everyone have the body's immune system. Now the body's immune system plays a very important role in dealing with a wide variety of diseases. Okay, so autoimmune diseases happen when the body's immune system attacks its own cells by accident. Okay, so attacks its own cells by accident, and there are more than 80 different kinds, such as type 1 diabetes and even rheumatoid arthritis. They are most important autoimmune diseases. So this imbalance could actually make so when the dormant X chromosomes, so X chromosomes among female and XY chromosome, there are certain dormant X chromosomes. So the dormant X chromosome is turned back on, and it can cause immune related genes that usually tightly controlled to be expressed more. So the imbalance could make the immune system less effective, making older women more likely to get autoimmune diseases. Okay, so older women are more vulnerable to these autoimmune diseases such as systemic lupus, erythematosus, and even rheumatoid arthritis and multiple sclerosis. So women are more likely to have these conditions than men. About 78% of all cases are actually women which have affected with these autoimmune diseases. So even though these genes actually play a big part, so infections and diet among other things can also raise the chance of these autoimmune diseases. And in fact, evidences or studies suggest that vitamin D has been shown to lower the chance of getting multiple sclerosis, which is an autoimmune disease. Multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease, and if you have a higher content of this vitamin D, then you will which controls this particular multiple sclerosis disease. And in fact, these geographical factors also affect how common these diseases are. For example, multiple sclerosis is more common among the northern regions of the world, and in fact tiredness, joint pain, and rashes are all signs of many of such diseases, so which can make it to take longer to diagnose because they are not very specific. Okay, so there is no solution, and most of the time treatment includes taking medicine to weaken the immune system to relieve ourselves from these autoimmune diseases. Okay, next important article is pastoralists in India need a better access land and rights recognition, says a UN report. Now, who are these pastoralists? So pastoralists are essentially cattle rearing people. Okay, so they usually live in Himalayas. For example, Gujars are pastoralists. So these are pastoralists. They migrate from one place to another place. For example, during summers they migrate to the higher altitudes, and during winters they come back to the lower altitudes within the mountains. Okay, so they actually known as nomadic pastoralists. So pastoralists rear cattle in the grasslands. So this new UN report has been suggesting that these pastoralists in India need a better access to land and even rights recognition. Now, why it is in news? So it is in news because UN report highlights the need for better land access and rights recognition for the Indian pastoralist communities. And apart from that, so it has also suggested to focus on rangeland degradation and even the marginalization of the pastoralist communities. Okay, so pastoralists actually rear their cattle in the pasture lands or grasslands. So therefore they play a very important role in protecting these pasture lands or grasslands. And apart from that, UN report has also suggested to focus on the marginalization as a challenge in the pastoralist communities. And in fact, the UN Convention on Combating Desertification reports that nearly half of the world's rangelands are degraded due to climate change and land use changes that are taking place at a faster pace. So therefore, the pastoralist communities actually play a very important role in reversing the degradation of land. Now, understanding these rangelands, so briefly understand the definition of these rangelands. So rangelands are extensive areas with native vegetation which is being grazed by domestic and wild herbivores, and these grasslands or rangelands covering around 40 to 50% of the Earth's surface. So these rangelands include tall grass prairies, okay, and steppes. These are all grasslands, and desert shrublands, savannas and chaparrals and tundras, and even some forests. All those things include range forests. So rangelands are managed by controlling grazing animals, unlike pasture lands with human established plants. So they support a diverse ecosystems, and they also play a very important and crucial role in wildlife habitat and livestock grazing as well. And about a UN Convention on Combating Desertification. So it was established in 1994, and it is a legally binding international agreement or convention. And this UN Convention on Combating Desertification essentially focuses on arid, semi-arid, dry, subhumid areas to combat desertification or to prevent existing desertification. And its goals aims include improving the living conditions of the people who are living in these areas and restoring the land productivity, mitigate the drought effects. So approach, they follow the bottom up approach, not the top down approach. They follow the bottom up approach from the grassroots level. And local participation is given a lot of importance, a lot of priority. Okay, so knowledge and technology transfer from between developed and developing countries is one of the key aspect of this United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Okay, so that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also hit the like button, and thank you.